Help her out.
He's also unworthy, but he still says, God, I really like you.
Yes, and God cleansed him through the blood cold, which symbolized Holy Communion. Yes, very good. So that's Isaiah. Yes, quickly. Nehemiah, what's the word from him? Well done. Another. This is Isaiah. I'm going to What's character? Any of you video? Have a characteristic you have in church. That's who gets you into serve God, yeah? So never ever say, I've got too much study, I've got too much work. And the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, it's really late. Thank you so very much. We're talking about Jonah, right? Jonah is the big one. Yes. Now that a question to know about Jonah, sure. Very good. Enjoy it.
Today we're going to be about the Jonah, and I was going to try to deliver all the negative training and message across. It's going to be 4 points, and nobody will complete it, so don't worry. They're not hard ones. So, who knows the history of Jonah? Can someone give me a quick summary of Jonah? Yes. You're getting by the fish, cool? Yeah.
And then God told him to go to Nineveh and preach there, and he didn't want to, so he went again and go somewhere else because he wanted to hide from God. And then there was this big storm coming, and no one knew what to do, and they were all praying to the idols, and then Jonah just said, throw me out, and they knew that they really didn't want to throw him, but then they eventually threw him, and then it was just calm, and then a big whale ate Jonah.
And then you prayed in the well, they came out, and then what did he do?
He went to Nineveh.
Yep.
And he told them that what he did.
Yeah. Yep. And then what happened? Good news, good news, they all lived, everyone repented, happy days. And then why was that?
Because Jonah was still a bit angry that God chose to save Nineveh. And also
Jonah was upset with God. And he said to him, why did you save these people? Didn't I tell you when I was back in Israel that this would happen? And God was, and him and God had a bit of a conversation. And basically at the end of the chapter, so there's only 4 chapters in the book of Jonah, so I suggest everybody read it. It took me 15 minutes to read. I'm sure it'll take you less to read. But at the end of the book, it finishes real abruptly. It doesn't end. There's no sandwich method. There's no way of writing. God had a conversation. He rebukes Jonah. He said, "Hey, I'm upset."
When did the story of the tree?
Yeah, so that was before that. That was chapter 4 right at the beginning. But at the end of chapter 4, God's really upset with Jonah, and then that's it. That's how the story ends. And it's quite a strange book. And you know why it's a strange book? Because Jonah wrote it. So can you imagine us in our own lives where we have to write a story about our service, we have to write a story about anything that we've done, our memoirs, or for example for yoga, you have to write an interview letter or a CV or a resume. Of course we're going to put the best things forward, right? We're even going to establish it a little bit. We're going to start expanding on the experiences and the skills we have and what we've gained from particular roles. We're going to put a reference down for our best friend, who's also the CEO of Google, and we're going to give them calls. He's going to give us a great reference. It's going to be fantastic. When Jonah wrote the book about Jonah, he wrote the most simple, really disobedient, sort of unworthy. He gave a story about how he didn't do good things and how God basically took those things and made them into good. And so one of the points we're going to talk about today is how God used Jonah for salvation and all the acts that he did to return all the bad into good. So, in the story of Jonah, Rob has summarized it really well, and we're going to be touching on some of these points. So, if everybody has their phone or a Bible available, We're going to be reading from the book of Jonah. But I want to just emphasize one thing before we get right into the book of Jonah, and that is that when Jonah preached to the Ninevites, his preaching was so good that St. John actually writes in Matthew, in the book of Matthew, St. Matthew writes in 12 verse 41, the men of Nineveh will rise up in judgment with this generation and condemn it because they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And indeed a greater than Jonah is here. So when you read about Jonah's actual service, it's 2 verses. And it's chapter 4, and he just says 2 things. He went and preached, and everything was alright. And that was basically it. No one talks about how much he preached, and how well he preached, and all the wonderful things he said. Right, can you think of a good preacher? A person who can give a great sermon? Peter, absolutely. How many people converted after Peter preached to them? Absolutely, that's fantastic. So the first point we're going to talk about today about Jonah is that God qualifies the called, he doesn't call the qualified. In the first verse of Jonah, chapter 1, verse 2, can somebody read me that? Jonah chapter 1, verse 2, who's got it?
Arise, yes, Nineveh, thy great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up upon them.
And what's the next verse?
When Jonah arose and flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, he went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish from the cave of the fair, and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord.
So in the Holy Fathers explain that Tarshish actually means the sea of Tarshish. And so when he was going to the sea, he actually had nowhere to be. So he had nowhere to go, he was just going away from God. So right at the beginning of the book of Jonah, God speaks to him, he says, I've got a mission for you, I've got a task. And Jonah says, don't worry about it, I'm out of here. And he checks it out. And many times in our lives, we're very much like Jonah when we come to service. God says to us, I've come to give you a service. He introduces the person in your life, he introduces a service into your life, and you say, this isn't to me. Can you think about one reason why Jonah didn't want to go to the sea? They were very sinful people. Some of the older people, why would Jonah not want to go to Nineveh in particular? Was Nineveh part of the people of God? No. So the people of God were the Hebrews or the people from Judah basically? And the Ninevites were sinful people. I'm going to go one step further from sinful and say they were actual enemies. These aren't people that we converse with on every day, they were enemies. And God basically said, go speak to your enemies. Go love them. Go take care of them. Go preach to them and give them a word of encouragement to go repent. And Jonah didn't want to. That was Jonah's number one problem in the whole book that you can see. Jonah never talks about how good he was, how much he was obedient, how well he, gave sermons. Jonah just emphasizes that he was disobedient, he was honest with God, and that he was unable to love. And through that, God taught him how to love. So when Jonah goes down to the bay, he gets on a boat, he actually pays for something and then jumps on the boat and leaves. Right? Sometimes in our own spiritual lives we do that as well. We check out. Yeah. Sometimes our spiritual fathers will say to us, "Hey, I've got this task for you." We go to them and say, "Oh, I've repented and I want to confess, and I've got all these things." And our confession father will say, "Great, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to fast. We're going to read the Bible twice a week, and we're going to start engaging with these services." And we go home. Wash my hands of all of these things. I don't do it. Like I'll put my hand up and say, when God gives me a task, I'm the first person to say, let's go to Tarshish, let's go to the sea, and I'm going to pay my fare, and I'm going to check out. And yet, God finds a way to change that and to make it blessing. So the important thing about the first point is that when God qualifies the call, He doesn't call the best people. He doesn't call the most qualified. You remember Moses, who God used a whole bunch of miracles. What was Moses' problem? Anybody know? He had a star. And yet, what does it say about him in Exodus? They say that he was brought up in Pharaoh's house, knowing all of the knowledge and wisdom of the Egyptians. He was very well versed. When he was stuck in of the burning bush, did Moses want to go immediately, or what did he say? Who knows? Who knows what Moses said in the burning bush? Did he want to go straight away, or did he want to tag team? Did he want to leave somebody else in? Who? Yes.
His brother, Aaron was.
Yeah, absolutely. He said, give him somebody else. Give him Aaron to do my task. Give him somebody else to do my task. And when God calls us to do something, He wants us. Not because we're the perfect, blessed people that we're going to do absolutely what He wants, but He sees a word starting with P that we all have. Potential. But we can preach, absolutely. So we have that potential to do whatever God wants us to do. That's the first point. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. If I'm sitting on the bench and I say to my servant, that's a great service, or that's not a good service, but I'm sitting on the bench thinking that I'm going to improve while I'm sitting down, it's not going to happen. Have you guys heard that verse, something sharpens something? Yeah, what is that? What does that something? It's a metal. Who can think of that metal? Iron. It's a verse in Proverbs. Iron sharpens iron. When you go into service, and it's not the people that you're talking to that benefit, or people that you're serving that benefit, it's actually you. So we benefit from that service. After he gets on the boat, something incredible happens. And let's read that bit that's next. So if we read in Jonah. Can we read verse 5? Chapter 1, verse 5.
Every man cried out to his God and threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest part of the ship, had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came to him and said to him, "What do you mean, sleeper? Arise, call on your God, perhaps your God will consider us, so that we may not perish."
So in this verse, Jonah takes the boat, he sees that the sea is very bad, everything's horrible, and what does he do? He goes right down to the bottom and he goes to sleep. He's disinterested, he's engaged. Yeah, he doesn't. Do you think he cares? No, he doesn't mind. He really doesn't mind. And so when the people come and wake him up, they say, "Hey, we're about to perish. Help us out." Yeah, how are you asleep during this? And sometimes in our own service, in our own lives, we look at situations where the house is on fire around me. Has anyone seen that meme with that cat sitting on the chair? And the house is on fire? And the cat, what is the captain underneath the cat? Yes. What's the captain underneath the cat? Everything's okay. Yeah. And so, sometimes in the world around us, and it's on fire like it is now, with all a lot of problems, and everything's okay, we choose to not do anything. But God knows that we have those skills. And this is the second point. Is that, first point, God doesn't call to qualify, He qualifies the call. And the second point is, through that potential, He knows that we have those skills. So when the people come and ask Jonah, "Hey, why is this happening?" What do you think he says to them? Does he lie? No. Does he stretch the truth? Does he say, maybe I've got lead in my pockets? No. He says, "Hey, it's me." He took responsibility. That's the skill that we inherently have as Christians and inherently have as people with moral compass. We have honesty, we have integrity. We stand up, put our hands up, and we say, "Hey, we think God basically is punishing me." So he said something very specific to the sailors. He said, "Pick me up and throw me over the boat." And he says that because he doesn't want to number one, he doesn't want to disobey God's word. And number two, he's asking them to help him do the right thing. So even though it's a very important lesson that even though we have those skills, sometimes we need to ask for somebody's help in order to facilitate something we want to accomplish. So what do the sailors do? Instead of just picking them up and throwing them overboard, they try to row harder against the waves because they don't want to get rid of them. And when the sea is going to let them anything happen, They say to God, please forgive us, and don't let this innocent man's blood be upon us. And they, what do? Throw him over the boat. After they throw him over the boat, the whale comes to eat them, and he's stuck there for 3 days, and that's all of chapter 3. He's saying, all chapter 2, sorry, he's saying that right. So, the second part of Jonah's skills that he does very well is he might not know right from down, left from right, but he knows that God is listening, and he's always listening. Even in the depths of the sadness, in the depths of the depression, in the depths of despair, he's thrown into the waves, into the water. He's obviously in the belly of a whale, and then he's still calling to God. Very important lesson is that the skills that we have, even though we might rely on others to throw us in the water, even though that we have our honesty, we have our integrity, the reality is God works the group. He works His miracles through us and because of us. He's able to then take us as vessels and to utilize us for further. It's actually very interesting that I've never read, but I realized recently. When the whale spits out Jonah, how far do you think he is from Nineveh? Very far? How far? Let's read the verse where, because I told you Jonah wrote the book, yeah? Didn't Jonah write the book?
Yeah.
So then what does he say in chapter 3, verse 3? Last, you read about that?
So Judah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent.
A 3-day journey in extent. Now, this has nothing to do with the talk tonight. I just love the fact that Jonah still complaining. It's still a 3-day journey. I feel like God could have taken him and spit him out on the bank of Nineveh. But it's like, it's still a 3-day journey. His honesty was continued out in that conversation that we had with God as the whole way through. I believe in my heart of hearts that God has a sense of humor. He really has to. And He loves us so much that He incorporates that sense of humor and encourages us to be open with Him. I had a miracle happen in my life once where I had a friend and we were making a bond together, and he placed his phone face down on this bench that we were making a bond. And then somehow water got on it, and he picked up his phone next and it switched off, can't switch it on. And he goes, no, it's not my fault. And he goes, God, you better fix this. I'm like, mate, this phone's done. It's not coming back. So he's like, let's put it into the right, so we'll pray about it, we'll come back tomorrow. I was like, should we take the battery out, we'll do what to do. Anyway, we prayed that night together, and he's like, if you don't fix this, I'm not going to church. And just straight up, I was like, mate, what are you doing? You can't be saying these things. That's not, you can't converse with God in an angry way. But if you read the book of Jonah, everything's angry. He says in one of the verses, God says to him in chapter 4, are you upset that I took this plant away from you? We're going to get to that point. He says, I'm so upset, even to death. He's like, I'd rather die than have a little bit of wind on me or a little bit of shade. That's how upset he is. Have you ever been so passionate that someone took something from you and you said, even to death? That person hurt me. I'm never going to forgive them as long as I live. My friend took something from me, or someone upset me, or a colleague, undercut me for a job, or this person broke up with me, or whatever the case is. You say to them, I'm gonna hold this forever, unto death. I'm never going to forgive them as long as I live. Oh yeah. So basically, he was really angry with God, and when we woke up the next morning, he turned it on, and I was fine. Putting it right? Yeah. But you got to pray as well, because that phone was he picked up the phone and it was like water was coming out. That didn't through me either. There was no way that phone was functioning. And it was on before he turned, there's a lot of things. It's the same way. The specifics of the phone can be discussed. So, in the third bit that we want to talk about is that Jonah was very humble. Yeah. So not only was he had the skills, he was called, and that God never left him. God said, you are mine now, and I'm going to use you. But that Jonah was very humble. Can you imagine writing, like we mentioned before, a book about yourself and your life, and you mentioned about it? And yet Jonah still used that for the glory of God. That everything that he did wrong was for the glory of God. In fact, when he was honest, not only with the sailors, but then he was honest with God, and he was honest the whole way through, even up to the Ninevites when he went and preached to them. So that humbleness is very important, and it's something that's synonymous with being a Christian. The next bit is how God turns every mistake into salvation. So, Jonah ran away, Jonah was thrown into the ocean, Jonah had to travel 3 days, and now he's at the city. Like I mentioned, he uses 2 verses to describe his whole ministry. And after those 2 verses, the people of Nineveh repent. Because of the things that he did, and all the bad things, all the disobedience and the arguments he had with God, he still used that for the glory of God. Can anybody think of someone doing something bad to someone, and then them actually turning out really well for them? There's plenty of examples in the Bible. I'll give you some. That's also not good in the long term. You never learned anything. Did you learn anything when you cheated?
I never cheated. I learned how to cheat.
So let me explain an example. So Joseph's brothers. When Joseph's brothers, they wanted to sell him, and they wanted to kill him, and they were going to throw him in the well. They sold him to the traders. What happened in the end? That bad was actually used for good. So that goodness that came from Joseph being almost killed and sold off to the slave traders, he became the second in charge of all of Egypt. And he actually gave his brothers asylum, and they all prospered while they were in Egypt. Jonah, yeah. So he did something bad, and then God used it for good. Yeah. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're talking about. Another example is how Samson married the Philistine woman. Who did he marry? Who was the Philistine woman? Who was it? Delilah. He married Delilah, and his parents, they were exceedingly sad that he married a Philistine woman. But yet God gives us the glory of his name. He uses people as a vessel, and even though you do something bad, when God chooses you, he says, I'm never letting you go. No matter what you do, I'm never letting you go. Sometimes in our service as well, we find that we might get a bit slack, we might get, we're not listening, we're not talking with each other, we might have missed important things and birthdays, and sometimes we feel a bit disheartened. Sometimes we say, look, I'm already serving in one thing, I can't serve in two. Sometimes we say, I just picked up a new job, I just had another baby. And then we use that as an excuse to say we're unable to serve. And the reality is, the more we serve, the more God gives us. And the more that we struggle and have our own experiences in having those sort of bad things, whether it's disobedience or whether it's any other sin, God uses that, and He will, for the glory of His name. So, the last point, because I know we're all almost there, is that that was the last one. Even better. Nailed it. Number 1, Jonah had the skills. Number 2, he was very humble. Number 3, a servant of God isn't perfect. But the mentality of serving when you're ready isn't a real mentality. Because God doesn't ask you to come off the bench and to play, He asks you to play off the go. And you will step up because you have those skills inherently, and you always do. And the 4th point was God can turn every mistake into salvation. So, I guess personal reflection before we finish. I love reading the story of Jonah, not because it was only 4 chapters long, but because every time you read the Bible, it refines you. Every time, the more you read the same stories, the more you pick up. There are very different things about that. And from Jonah, what I really love is that he argued with God the whole time. And that he never explained himself in a positive manner. Sometimes I think when we talk about ourselves as Christians, we say, I don't do that. I don't have these skills. I'm unable to do this. We always talk about ourselves in a negative way. But inherently knows who we are, and God has chosen each and every single one of us for a mission, for a task. And because of that task, He grants us that salvation. It's only when we walk those 3 days to Nineveh to go preach that He empowers us, that He gives us that grace in order to facilitate that salvation.
And glory be to But just to point this against the kids might have not understood that correctly. Does it mean we should get angry with God? No. Because we respect to God, but we can express ourselves completely with God, yeah? And does it mean we have to do the wrong thing for God to work in us? No. So even if something wrong happens, God can still use it. It's like it, yeah? Yeah, just in case you go to mom and dad and say, I want to do something wrong because God can use it in my life. No. There, you already understand it? Sorry, I was talking to Nolan because I thought you might not understand it. Thank you. These kids understand. Let's stand up and pray. May the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much, Lord, for giving us a beautiful talk by Victoria about Jonah, Lord. Truly is an incredible character, Lord, where everything was completely open about him, Lord. Every weakness of his and weaknesses that we would not expect of the servant of God. But, Lord, despite all of those things, you knew his heart was in the right place. You knew that you could use him, and you knew that he would come to obey your Lord. And even in the darkest moments, the Lord, he still believed that you would listen to him and had hope in you. Help us, Lord, to have that same heart that is shown as the Lord, that we know your loving heart, we know your soft heart, O Lord, that even that we put ourselves into awful situations. Yet you, O Lord, we look up to you and we have hope that you're our Father who pulls us out of every distress. We ask you, Lord, that you grant us a repentance life. And if we do fall for whatever reason, O Lord, help us to come back. Through the prayers of Virgin Mary and the prayers of all your saints and the prayers of Jonah the prophet, hear us, O Lord, as we pray thankfully, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.